The bulldozer's engine roared to life as Marcus watched his dream pool disappear into rubble. Karen's shrill voice cut through the chaos. "I'm calling the police." But when the officers arrived and saw what was really buried beneath that concrete, their laughter echoed through the neighborhood and Karen's face went white as snow. Some secrets are worth more than any pool, and some neighbors should never have pushed this far. The morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus Rivera's backyard. As he stood beside the hulking yellow bulldozer, its diesel engine rumbling like a mechanical beast ready to feast, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the early hour, and his calloused hands gripped the work order that had arrived 3 days ago. The final nail in the coffin of his 15-year battle with the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association. Property violation 847B, he muttered, reading the official letterhead for the 100th time. Pool installation non-compliant with current HOA regulations. Mandatory removal within 72 hours or face legal action and daily fines of $500. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same pool that had been grandfathered in when he bought the house in 2009 was now somehow a violation because Karen Whitfield, the new HOA president, had pushed through a neighborhood beautification initiative that conveniently targeted every amenity that didn't align with her pristine vision of suburban perfection. Marcus had built half his life around that pool. Summer barbecues with his late wife Sophia, teaching his daughter Isabella to swim when she was 4, hosting neighborhood kids for birthday parties back when the community actually felt like a community. Now Isabella was away at college, Sophia had been gone for 3 years, and the pool had become his sanctuary, the one place where her laughter still seemed to echo off the water. "You sure about this, Mr. Rivera?" called out Jake Morrison, the bulldozer operator, a grizzled man in his 50s with forearms like steel cables. "That's a beautiful pool. Seems like a damn shame. Trust me, I've exhausted every other option." Marcus's voice carried the weight of countless legal consultations, city council meetings, and sleepless nights spent researching property law. "The HOA has me over a barrel. It's either this or lose the house to legal fees." The pool itself was a masterpiece of suburban engineering, an Olympic-sized rectangle with custom stonework, underwater lighting, and a waterfall feature that Sophia had insisted on. They'd spent $30,000 on it back when that kind of money actually meant something to a high school principal's salary. Now it was just an expensive liability. As Jake positioned the bulldozer, Marcus heard the unmistakable sound of heels clicking against concrete. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Well, I see you finally came to your senses." Karen Whitfield emerged from the gate that separated their properties, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed despite the early hour, her white linen outfit spotless and pressed. At 52, she looked like she'd stepped out of a real estate magazine, all sharp angles and practiced smiles that never quite reached her pale blue eyes. "Morning, Karen." Marcus kept his voice level, though his jaw tightened involuntarily. "Oh, don't be so glum about it. This is going to increase both our property values significantly." She surveyed the pool with the calculating gaze of a predator. "I have to say, I'm impressed you're handling this so maturely. Some people would have made this unnecessarily difficult." Marcus turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her take a half step back. "You mean like when you tried to get Mrs. Chen's rose garden declared a pest attraction? Or when you forced the Johnsons to remove their kid's swing set because it was visually disruptive?" Karen's smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "I'm simply trying to maintain the standards that make this neighborhood desirable property values." "Marcus, it's all about property values, right? And it has nothing to do with the fact that you can see my backyard from your kitchen window." "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it outright." Marcus stepped closer, and Karen's manicured fingers tightened around her phone. "You've been gunning for this pool since the day you moved in. Every HOA meeting, every anonymous complaint, every sudden rule change, it all traces back to you." Jake cleared his throat from atop the bulldozer. Folks, we need to get started if we want to finish before the heat picks up." Karen straightened her shoulders, reasserting her authority. "Yes, by all means, proceed. I'll just supervise to ensure everything is done properly." She pulled out her phone and began taking pictures. For the HOA records, of course. Marcus felt a familiar rage building in his chest, the same anger that had sustained him through 3 years of grief and bureaucratic warfare. But today, something else flickered beneath it. Something that might have been anticipation. "Jake," he called out, his voice carrying a new edge. "Before you start on the pool itself, I need you to break up that section of concrete right there." He pointed to a seemingly innocuous patch of stonework near the pool's deep end. Karen lowered her phone, frowning. "What's under there?" "Oh, just some old plumbing that needs to be addressed. Nothing you need to worry about." But Karen was already moving closer, her real estate instincts kicking in. Marcus had seen that look before, the expression of someone who sensed opportunity or scandal in equal measure. Jake maneuvered the bulldozer into position, its massive blade gleaming in the morning sun. The first impact sent shockwaves through the ground, and chunks of concrete exploded outward like gray confetti. Karen yelped and jumped back, her white outfit now decorated with dust and debris. "Careful," she shrieked. "This is a designer outfit." Second impact cracked the concrete wide open, revealing a dark space beneath. Jake killed the engine and climbed down to investigate, his weathered face creasing with curiosity. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, kneeling beside the opening. "Mr. Rivera, you might want to take a look at this." Marcus approached the breach, his heart hammering against his ribs. The concrete had concealed a rectangular cavity, roughly the size of a coffin, lined with what appeared to be cedar wood. Inside, wrapped in heavy plastic sheeting, were dozens of metal boxes. Karen pushed past both men, her phone already recording. "What is this? What were you hiding under your pool?" Marcus couldn't suppress the smile that spread across his face as he reached into the cavity and pulled out one of the boxers. The plastic crinkled as he tore it away, revealing a military ammunition case with U.S. Army stenciled on the side. Inside, neat stacks of documents and photographs were preserved in waterproof containers. "Karen," he said, his voice now carrying an almost musical quality, "meet the Riverside Heights time capsule, buried in 1987 when this subdivision was first developed." Her phone trembled in her manicured hands. "Time capsule? What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled out a manila folder and opened it with theatrical precision. Inside were dozens of black and white photographs showing the land before hills, a pristine creek, and a small family cemetery that had been there since the 1800s. You see, when they built this neighborhood, they had to relocate a historical cemetery. All very legal, all properly documented. But the thing is, Karen, He pulled out another folder, this one thick with official documents. They missed a few graves. The color drained from Karen's face. "What do you mean, missed a few graves?" Marcus gestured to the photos with the flourish of a master showman. "According to these surveys, there are at least 6 unmarked graves scattered throughout the neighborhood. One under the Johnsons' swing, set one under Mrs. Chen's rose garden, and one," he paused for maximum effect, "right under your perfectly manicured front lawn." Karen's phone clattered to the concrete. "That's impossible. The city would have records. There would be documentation." "Oh, there is documentation. Right here." Marcus held up a thick manila envelope sealed with official city stamps. "Turns out my late wife's grandfather was the surveyor who oversaw the original cemetery relocation. Sophia inherited all his papers when he died, and she had the foresight to preserve them properly." Jake whistled low and long. "So you're telling me this entire neighborhood is built on top of a cemetery?" "Not the entire neighborhood, just the prime lots. The ones with the best views, the highest property values." Marcus's smile had taken on a predatory quality that made Karen take another step backward. "Including 447 Maple Street, your address." "Karen." The implications hit Karen like a physical blow. She stumbled, her perfect composure cracking like ice on a spring day. This is ... this is fraud. You knew this, and you never said anything. You let us all buy houses on top of what? Legal cemetery relocations that were properly documented and filed with the city." Marcus spread the photographs across the broken concrete like a dealer laying out a winning hand. "Every single one of these transactions was legitimate. The problem is, some of the graves were missed during the original relocation. Happens more often than you'd think." Karen's breathing became shallow and rapid. "But the property values, the liability ... the legal implications. Now you're starting to understand." Marcus began returning the documents to their protective cases with methodical precision. "See, the thing about building on former cemetery land is that there are very specific disclosure requirements." The Channel 7 news van pulled into Riverside Heights at 11:47 a.m., its satellite dish gleaming like a metallic vulture, circling fresh carrion. Marcus watched from his kitchen window as reporter Jessica Chono, relation to his rose garden neighbor Emer, with her cameraman, her perfectly styled black hair whipping in the morning breeze. Behind them, a second van from Fox 4 rounded the corner, followed by what appeared to be a freelance blogger with a smartphone and an oversized press badge. "Jesus Christ," Jake muttered, still stationed by the bulldozer like a bewildered sentry. "You really called the cavalry." The time capsule discovery had taken on a life of its own. What started as Marcus's calculated revenge against Karen Whitfield was now spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. Within an hour of his first phone call, his doorbell had rung 6 times. Concerned neighbors, HOA board members, and even Margaret Thompson from 3 streets over, who claimed her late husband had mentioned something peculiar about the land surveys back in '87. Karen's white BMW sat in her driveway like a beached whale, its owner nowhere to be seen. But Marcus could feel her watching from behind the pristine curtains of 447 Maple Street, probably calculating the damage to her real estate empire with the precision of a forensic accountant. His phone buzzed with another call. "Isabella, Dad. Are you okay? I'm seeing stuff about our neighborhood on social media." Marcus felt a pang of guilt. His daughter was supposed to be focused on her senior year at Northwestern, not dealing with her father's suburban warfare. "Everything's fine, mija. Just some neighborhood drama." "Dad, there's a TikTok video with 2 million views showing our backyard. The caption says, 'Man discovers bodies under pool.' Please tell me you didn't actually find bodies." "No bodies, just old documents and photographs." Marcus walked to his back window, watching Jessica Chen set up her camera angle to capture both the pool and the opened time capsule. It's complicated. It always is, with you and that damn HOA. Isabella's voice carried the exasperated affection of a daughter who'd inherited her mother's practical nature and her father's stubborn streak. Mom always said you'd rather fight City Hall than back down from a principal. The mention of Sophia hit Marcus like it always did, a sudden, sharp reminder of everything he'd lost and everything he was still fighting to preserve. Your mother also said, some fights are worth having, and some fights can destroy you. Dad, whatever you're doing, just ... be careful, okay? I can't lose you too. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his reflection in the window. Somewhere in the past 4 hours, his simple act of spite had evolved into something larger and more dangerous than he'd anticipated. The time capsule wasn't just leverage against Karen anymore, it was evidence of a cover-up that could unravel the entire subdivision. A sharp knock at his front door interrupted his brooding. Through the peephole he could see Jessica Chen's press credentials and her cameraman's imposing bulk. Mr. Rivera. Jessica Chen, Channel 7 News. Could we have a moment of your time? Marcus opened the door, instantly regretting not changing out of his dust-covered work clothes. Jessica Chen was younger than she appeared on television, probably mid-30s, with the kind of aggressive intelligence that made her dangerous in the field. Mr. Rivera, we understand you've made a significant historical discovery in your backyard. Can you tell us what you found? A time capsule, Marcus replied carefully. Documents and photographs from the original development of this neighborhood. The camera rolled as Jessica pressed forward, and these documents suggest that Riverside Heights was built over an old cemetery. They suggest that some graves from the original Whitmore family cemetery may have been missed during the relocation process in 1987. Jessica's eyes lit up with the predatory gleam of a reporter sensing a larger story. How many graves are we talking about, Mr. Rivera? This was the moment of truth. Marcus could minimize the discovery, protect his neighbors from the media circus that was about to descend on their quiet suburban lives. Or he could go nuclear and watch Karen Whitfield's perfectly manicured world burn to the ground. According to the surveys, at least 6 unmarked graves, possibly more. And where are these graves located? Marcus gestured toward the heart of the neighborhood, scattered throughout the development. Under lawns, gardens, even some of the houses themselves. The camera swung to capture the pristine houses lining Maple Street, their carefully maintained facades now carrying the shadow of scandal. In the distance, Marcus could see curtains twitching as neighbors realized they were being filmed. Mr. Rivera, residents are going to want to know, is their property safe? Are there legal ramifications for homeowners who may have unknowingly purchased homes built over burial sites? That's a question for lawyers and city planners. I'm just a retired teacher who wanted to keep his pool. Jessica Chen's eyebrows shot. Up your pool. What does your pool have to do with this discovery? And there it was, the opening Marcus had been waiting for. The Riverside Heights Homeowners Association, specifically their president Karen Whitfield, recently forced me to demolish my pool due to new beautification standards. It was during the demolition process that we uncovered the time capsule, so this discovery was accidental. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Let's call it serendipitous. The interview continued for another 10 minutes, with Jessica Chen expertly extracting quotes that would make excellent sound bites. Marcus could practically see the evening news promo, Suburban Secrets, the dark history buried beneath Riverside Heights. As the news crew packed up their equipment, Marcus noticed a familiar figure approaching from across the street. Thomas Brennan, vice president of the HOA and Karen's most vocal supporter, strode across the lawn with the determined gait of a man preparing for battle. Rivera, Thomas called out, his face flushed with anger and exertion. What the hell do you think you're doing? Thomas Brennan was everything Marcus had come to despise about the modern suburb: a middle-aged, financial advisor who treated homeownership like a stock portfolio and human decency like a quarterly earnings report. His perpetually furrowed brow and aggressive handshake had made him the perfect lieutenant for Karen's reign of petty tyranny. Good morning, Thomas. I'm having my pool inspected for historical significance. Historical significance? My ass. Thomas jabbed a finger toward the news vans. You're destroying property values for the entire neighborhood. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to our home equity? Jessica Chen, who had been pretending to pack up her equipment, suddenly reappeared with her microphone. Mr. Brennan, is it? I'm Jessica Chen, Channel 7 News. As vice president of the HOA, what's your response to these revelations about potential burial sites? Thomas's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on an alarming purple. No comment. This is all. This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Rivera is clearly acting out of spite over a routine HOA enforcement action. Routine. Marcus stepped closer, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd spent 30 years managing teenage drama. Forcing a homeowner to destroy a grandfathered amenity because it offends your aesthetic sensibilities is routine. The pool was a violation of current community standards, standards that didn't exist when I bought this house. Standards that were specifically crafted to target features that your president personally disliked. Jessica Chen practically vibrated with journalistic excitement. Are you suggesting that the HOA has been selectively enforcing regulations? I'm stating it as fact. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his Photos app. I have documentation of every violation notice issued in the past 2 years. 73% targeted properties visible from 447 Maple Street. Karen Whitfield's address. Thomas sputtered like a defective engine. That's correlation, not causation. Karen has been instrumental in maintaining our community's high standards. Where is Karen, by the way? Marcus asked innocently. I would have expected her to be front and center for this historic moment. The question hit Thomas like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed several times before he managed a response. Mrs. Whitfield is consulting with legal counsel regarding the proper procedures for handling historical discoveries. Legal counsel. Jessica Chen moved closer with her microphone. Is the HOA concerned about potential liability issues? Thomas realized he'd walked directly into a trap. We're simply being cautious, responsible, the way any professional organization would handle such a situation, by silencing the person who made the discovery, Marcus pressed, by trying to destroy the evidence before it could be properly investigated. We weren't destroying evidence, we were enforcing legitimate community standards. On a pool that's been in compliance for 15 years? A pool that was specifically targeted because your president didn't like looking at it from her kitchen window. The argument might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by the arrival of a white city sedan with official plates. Marcus recognized the driver immediately. Rebecca Martinez, senior planner for the city's historical preservation office. She'd been Sophia's friend from college, and one of the few people who'd understood the depth of his loss when his wife died. Rebecca emerged from her car, carrying a thick folder and wearing the expression of someone who'd been dragged away. Karen Whitfield approached the group with the measured confidence of a chess player moving in for checkmate. The manila folder in her hands seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and Marcus felt his moment of triumph beginning to crumble like sand through his fingers. Ms. Chen, isn't it? Karen addressed the reporter with the practiced charm of someone accustomed to media manipulation. I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association. I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding about the nature of Mr. Rivera's discovery. Jessica Chen's camera operator swung his lens toward Karen, instinctively drawn to the promise of conflict. Mrs. Whitfield, what can you tell us about the historical documents found on Mr. Rivera's property? Karen opened her folder with theatrical precision, revealing what appeared to be official city documents, complete with stamps and signatures. These are the complete cemetery relocation records from 1987, obtained this morning from the city clerk's office. Every grave from the original Whitmore family cemetery was properly relocated to Riverside Memorial Park. Every single one. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. That's impossible. The surveys clearly show. Radar anomalies from 1986. Karen interrupted smoothly, but what they don't show, because Mr. Rivera conveniently omitted this information, is the follow-up survey from March 1987, confirming that all anomalies were investigated and resolved. She pulled out a laminated document that made Mark's stomach drop. It was indeed a follow-up survey, signed by the same surveyor whose other documents he'd found in the time capsule. But this one told a completely different story. You see, Karen continued, addressing the camera directly, what Mr. Rivera discovered was a time capsule containing preliminary surveys and historical photographs. Fascinating historical artifacts, certainly, but hardly evidence of any cover-up or missed graves. Rebecca Martinez stepped forward, her professional demeanor shifting from casual interest to serious concern. Mrs. Whitfield, may I examine those documents? Of course. Karen handed over the folder with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. I think you'll find everything is in perfect order. As Rebecca studied the paperwork, Marcus felt his carefully constructed revenge fantasy dissolving into nightmare. The follow-up survey was legitimate, he could tell from Rebecca's expression, as she cross-referenced the documents with her phone. Appears to authenticate the complete relocation of all burial sites, Rebecca said slowly, clearly uncomfortable with having to deliver what amounted to a death blow to Marcus's credibility. The ground anomalies noted in the preliminary survey were investigated and found to be geological formations, not graves. Thomas Brennan's face transformed from panic to vindictive glee. So there are no graves under our neighborhood. No legal liability, no property disclosure violations. According to these documents, no, Rebecca confirmed reluctantly. Jessica Chen, sensing her headline story evaporating, pressed for drama. Mr. Rivera, how do you respond to evidence that contradicts your claims? Marcus stared at the documents in Rebecca's hands, his mind racing through possibilities. How had Karen obtained records that didn't exist in the time capsule? How had she known exactly what to look for? And why did she look so satisfied, like someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks? I'd like to examine those documents myself, Marcus said carefully. Karen's smile widened. Of course, though I have to say, Marcus, this is quite embarrassing. Making wild accusations, calling the media, disrupting the entire neighborhood based on incomplete information. She turned to address the camera again. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that necessitates strong HOA oversight. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Marcus looked at Karen's triumphant expression, then at the timing of her miraculous document discovery, then at the way she'd staged this entire confrontation for maximum public humiliation. "You knew?" he said quietly. "I beg your pardon. You knew about the time capsule. You've known all along." Karen's smile faltered for just a microsecond, but it was enough. Marcus had spent 30 years reading teenage faces, and he recognized the momentary flash of panic in someone who'd been caught. "That's absurd. How could I possibly have known about documents buried under your pool? Because you've been trying to get me to remove that pool for 2 years. Not because it violates any aesthetic standards, but because you knew what was underneath it." The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica Chen's camera swung between Marcus and Karen, capturing the tension crackling between them. "Mr. Rivera," Karen said with forced patience, "you're clearly upset about having to comply with HOA regulations, but paranoid fantasies aren't going to help your case. Then explain how you managed to obtain the exact documents needed to refute my claims within 3 hours of the discovery. Explain how you knew which specific records to request from a city clerk's office that's famously slow and bureaucratic." Karen's composure was cracking now, hairline fractures appearing in her perfect facade. "I simply made some phone calls to whom the city clerk's office doesn't work that fast. Trust me, I've tried. It took me 6 weeks to get a simple building permit last year." Rebecca Martinez was studying the documents more closely now, her trained eye-catching details that had escaped her initial review. "Mrs. Whitfield, these documents. Some of these stamps appear to be photocopies rather than originals." "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating that original city documents don't typically show evidence of multiple photocopying generations. These look like copies of copies." Thomas Brennan, sensing the tide turning again, tried to intervene. "Does it really matter if they're copies? The information is still legitimate, actually." "It matters quite a bit," Rebecca interrupted. "Authentication of historical documents requires examination of originals, not reproduced copies. And some of these signatures," she pulled out a magnifying glass from her field kit, "they appear to have been added after the fact." Karen's face went white, then red, then an alarming shade of purple. "This is ridiculous. Are you suggesting I forged city documents?" "I'm suggesting that these documents require further authentication before they can be considered valid evidence." Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with something darker, the realization that Karen's desperation ran deeper than simple neighborhood control. "Rebecca, is it possible to determine when these documents were actually created, with the right forensic analysis?" "Yes. Ink dating, paper analysis, digital enhancement of potential erasures or alterations." Rebecca was now examining the papers with the intensity of a detective studying evidence. "Mrs. Whitfield, where exactly did you obtain these documents?" Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed a response. The city clerk's office." "I told you." "Which clerk? What department? Do you have a receipt or reference?" "Number 4, the request." It was. "This is harassment. I'm trying to help resolve this situation, and you're treating me like a criminal." Jessica Chen, smelling blood in the water, moved closer with her microphone. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you saying you can't provide documentation for how you obtained these records?" "Of course I can provide documentation. I just don't see why I should have to justify myself too." She was interrupted by the sound of a car door slamming. A silver Honda Accord had pulled up behind the news vans, and Marcus recognized the driver immediately, Elena Boscus, the investigative reporter from the Tribune who'd covered several of his school board meetings over the years. Elena emerged from her car, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the expression of someone who'd smelled a story worth chasing. She was in her 40s, with prematurely gray hair, and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent digging into places where powerful people preferred she didn't look. "Marcus Rivera," Elena called out as she approached. "Elena Boscus. Tribune, I got your message about document irregularities in the Riverside Heights development. Sorry I'm late. I was checking some records at the courthouse." Karen's face drained of what little color remained. "What message? What records?" Marcus felt a moment of confusion before realizing what had happened. Elena had arrived based on his morning phone calls, but she'd clearly done her own research. "In the interim, Mrs. Whitfield, isn't it?" Elena addressed Karen directly. "I believe we need to talk about your family's connection to the original Riverside Heights development." The question hit like a sledgehammer. Karen actually stumbled backward, her carefully maintained composure finally shattering completely. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because according to county records, your maiden name was Whitmore. As in the Whitmore family cemetery that was relocated to make way for this subdivision." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, the distant hum of newsvan generators, the sound of curtains rustling as neighbors pressed closer to their windows. "That's..." Karen's voice came out as a whisper. "That's not... yes, I'm related to the original landowners, but that doesn't mean it means you've had access to family records that other people didn't," Elena interrupted, "including knowledge of exactly what was buried where and what might have been missed during the relocation process." Thomas Brennan looked like a man. Part 4. Karen Whitfield stood frozen in the center of what had become an impromptu amphitheater of suburban justice. Her secret real estate listing displayed on Marcus's phone screen like evidence at a murder trial. Donald Whitfield was the first to break. He pulled out his own phone with trembling fingers, his face cycling through disbelief, betrayal, and finally, a cold fury that Marcus had never seen in the mild-mannered insurance adjuster. "You listed our house." Donald's voice cracked on the last word. "You listed our house without telling me." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. "Dono, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been planning to run away? That you've been lying to me for 20 years about your family, collecting secret royalties from our neighbors, and now you want to abandon me to deal with the legal consequences?" Elena Vasquez was typing furiously on her laptop, her investigative instincts in full overdrive. "Mrs. Whitfield, when exactly did you contact the real estate agent? Before or after Mr. Rivera discovered the time capsule?" The question was a forensic scalpel, cutting straight to the heart of Karen's deception. Marcus could see her calculating, trying to find an answer that wouldn't completely destroy what remained of her credibility. The listing was precautionary, in case the historical discovery affected property values. Bullshit. The profanity came from Thomas Brennan, whose transformation from Karen's loyal lieutenant to her harshest critic was now complete. "You listed the house this morning because you knew this was all going to come out. You've been planning your exit strategy." Jessica Chen moved closer with her camera, sensing the moment when private family drama becomes public spectacle. "Mr. Whitfield, did you have any knowledge of your wife's financial arrangements or her plans to sell your home?" Donald looked directly into the camera with the hollow expression of a man whose entire life had just revealed itself to be a carefully constructed lie. "I thought I was married to a community volunteer who cared about property values. Turns out I was married to a con artist who's been stealing from our neighbors for decades. I haven't stolen anything." Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. "The royalty payments are completely legal. They're part of the original development contract. Legal doesn't mean ethical," Rebecca Martinez interjected, her official authority lending weight to the moral judgment. "And using your position as HOA president to manipulate property values while secretly profiting from sales turnover raises serious questions about fiduciary duty." Marcus watched Karen's face as the full scope of her exposure became clear. She wasn't just facing public humiliation, she was potentially looking at civil lawsuits, ethics violations, and the complete destruction of everything she'd built over 2 decades in Riverside Heights. But Karen Whitfield hadn't survived as a suburban power broker for 20 years without learning how to fight dirty. Marcus could see her regrouping, marshaling her remaining resources for one final counterattack. "Fine," she said, her voice taking on the steely edge of someone with nothing left to lose. "You want to play this game? Let's play it all the way." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through files with the efficiency of someone who'd been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. "Marcus, you want to talk about secrets? Let's discuss why your precious wife Sophia was so interested in preserving those surveyor documents. Let's talk about what she really knew about this neighborhood's history." The mention of Sophia hit Marcus. Like a physical blow, he felt the familiar rage building in his chest. But beneath it was something colder and more dangerous, the realization that Karen was about to weaponize his grief for her own survival. "Leave my wife out of this. Your wife made herself part of this when she inherited those documents and decided to hide them, instead of reporting them to the proper authorities." Karen's smile returned, but now it carried the venom of a cornered snake. "Tell them, Marcus. Tell them about Sophia's family secret." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Marcus felt Elena Vasquez's investigative instincts focusing on him like a spotlight, felt the camera swinging in his direction, felt his neighbor's attention shifting from Karen's crimes to whatever bombshell she was about to drop. "I don't know what you're talking about, don't you? Sofia Rivera, nee Morales, granddaughter of Eduardo Morales, the surveyor who oversaw the original cemetery relocation." Karen pulled up something on her phone that made Marcus's blood run cold. The same Eduardo Morales who was paid $50,000 in 1987 to ensure that certain irregularities in the relocation process were never officially recorded. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus felt his carefully constructed moral high ground crumbling beneath his feet, replaced by the terrible possibility that his late wife, his saintly, principled, beloved Sophia had been complicit in a cover-up that predated their marriage. That's impossible. Sophia would never. Sophia inherited more than just documents from her grandfather, Marcus. She inherited his guilt. Why do you think she was so insistent on preserving everything in that time capsule? She was trying to maintain evidence of her grandfather's crime while keeping it buried where no one would ever find it. Elena Vasquez looked up from her laptop with the expression of someone who'd just discovered a story within a story within a story. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you alleging that the original cemetery relocation was deliberately compromised?" I'm alleging that Eduardo Morales was paid to falsify his final survey reports, and that his granddaughter Sofia spent 30 years keeping that secret buried under her husband's swimming pool. The revelations sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Marcus felt his neighbors' sympathetic gazes shifting to suspicion, felt the media attention turning from Karen's corruption to his family's potential complicity in a decades-old fraud. But as he processed Karen's accusation, Marcus realized something that made him smile for the first time in hours. Karen had just made a fatal mistake. Eduardo Morales died in 1994, he said quietly. Karen blinked, momentarily thrown by the non sequitur. What does that have to do with anything? If Eduardo was paid to falsify surveys in 1987, and he died in 1994, that means he lived with his supposed guilt for 7 years? Marcus pulled out his own phone and began scrolling through photos. Sofia and I started dating in 1995. We were married in 1997. She inherited his papers in 1998. He found what he was looking for, a family photo from Sofia's college graduation. In 1996, Eduardo Morales stood beside his granddaughter, wearing the proud smile of a man with nothing to hide. Karen, if my wife's grandfather was carrying around guilt over a $50,000 bribe, don't you think he might have mentioned it to someone? Don't you think there would be evidence of that money somewhere? Karen's certainty began to waver. The payment could have been made in cash, $50,000 in 1987 cash. To a city surveyor making $30,000 a year? Where would he have hidden it? How would he have spent it without arousing suspicion? Marcus was gaining momentum now, his teacher's instincts kicking in as he dissected Karen's desperation, accusation, and more importantly, if Sofia knew her grandfather had taken a bribe, why would she preserve evidence that could incriminate him? Elena Vasquez was following the logic with professional interest. Mrs. Whitfield, do you have any documentation to support your allegations about Mr. Morales? Karen's phone trembled in her hands as she realized her final gambit was falling apart. Family stories? Rumors? The same kind of evidence Marcus was using to accuse me? No, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd finally found solid ground. The difference is, my evidence is sitting right there in that time capsule. Physical documents, authenticated photographs, verified surveys. Your evidence is a desperate lie designed to deflect attention from your own crimes. Rebecca Martinez. I had been quietly examining the time capsule contents during the confrontation, her trained eye cataloging details that others had missed. Actually, there's something else here that might be relevant to this discussion. She pulled out a manila envelope that Marcus hadn't noticed before. Sealed with wax and bearing the official stamp of the Catholic Diocese of Chicago, this appears to be a formal blessing and consecration document for the cemetery relocation, Rebecca said, breaking the seal with professional care, signed by both the diocese and the surveyor's office, certifying that all graves were properly relocated, and that the ground was formally deconsecrated before development began. She read aloud from the document. We hereby certify that the relocation of all burial sites from the Whitmore family cemetery has been completed in accordance with both civil law and canonical requirements. All remains have been transferred to consecrated ground at Riverside Memorial Park. The surveyor's final report confirms no graves remain on the development site. The document was signed by 3 parties, the diocesan representative, the developer, and Eduardo Morales, with a notation that the surveyor had donated his fee to the church as a gesture of respect for the sacred nature of this undertaking. The final piece of Karen's accusation crumbled into dust. Not only had Eduardo Morales not taken a bribe, he'd donated his entire fee to the church, turning what could have been a profitable job into an act of religion.